Hello, guys. Happy Self-Healing Saturday, Christmas Eve. I'm really excited to talk to you guys today because there's a topic that kind of came up a few times this week, and it's extra nice that our buddy is up here with us because he is part of the inspiration for today's topic.
I love this dog.
Yeah, we love this dog. He's kind of our obsession. Actually, we're so excited. Last night we went Christmas shopping for him, and he loves presents more than I think anyone ever. He loves presents more than anything. He always thinks anytime you have a package that it's for him, and so we got him a ton of really great Christmas presents, and I seriously can't wait. I'm so excited to give him his presents because he just loves and appreciates them so much. But earlier this week, I posted a video that about giving, the topic is, can you give other people conflict shocks? And this is something that I think I've talked to you about, and it's an idea that I had, like, when more people know about German New Medicine, when it's kind of more the accepted understanding of the way the body functions, it's really interesting to think about if someone, say, develops a cancer or some other type of adaptive response in their body, that they potentially could go back to someone and say, listen, you caused me to have this conflict shock. My body made these adapt because you did something to me. And, kind of the interesting, I just had these thoughts about, trying to sue someone, possibly, we live in a very litigious world that you might try to sue someone because you say that they gave you a conflict shock, causing your body to adapt in a certain way, and just kind of all the weirdness that could get into. But the concept of giving, say, your animal, because we had an experience with him earlier this week where we realized that he had a painful hip, like his hip was hurting him, he couldn't jump up and down like he normally does, he was having a little trouble sitting, and I related it to the hip conflict shock, which is feeling overwhelmed by continuous demands. And we had been telling him to stop scratching because he's got this, his winter coat, and he's really, really itchy and a little dry, and his skin, so he just was itching a lot, and it was kind of driving us crazy, though, the constant itching and him biting at himself, and so we tell him to stop over and over and over again. And we think that equated to him having this conflict of this overwhelming, inability to keep up with these continuous demands.
And I would just interject there, too, that it's really, like, even just hearing you say that, it sounds kind of conjectural. It sounds kind of, but the interesting thing for me was that way before even considering any kind of like G&M business at all, way before I even noticed the hip situation, I was aware of the fact that he seemed very beleaguered, by these, because, it's kind of an irritating thing to have this constant just scratch, thump, or these, dog mouth sounds that are kind of gross sometimes when you're, trying to focus on something. And, you kind of snap at the dog or kind of say, stop, or something like that, and he had started kind of giving us kind of, because when you're around your dog, we're dog people, and you just kind of notice certain things about your dog and their expressions and stuff, and so it was clear in the beginning he pretty much was ignoring, but over time it was almost like he knew, when you corrected him, it was like he felt as if he was being corrected for something that he knew he shouldn't be doing. But that, it's a scratch. You have a scratch, you just kind of go for it, And so it was interesting for me. It's one of those things, I don't know if you can even really connect. Yeah, maybe you had to be there, but I know that this is a profound example for me because of the fact that I was like, I'm really giving him a hard time. I got to be a little bit nicer about this. Because I was noticing that he looked like partly exasperated, partly sort of hurt feelings. And, animals, and dogs in particular, are very sensitive to being social animals, very sensitive to being talked about, very sensitive to being made fun of, very, sensitive to being kind of like disregarded or whatever. And so that's an interesting thing. I think the personalities, you're different, I look like people, But that was a very interesting thing for me, the fact that I had noticed it. And, when people are interested in a paradigm or a thought system, it can kind of become like an echo chamber, you know what I'm saying, where everything you see in life is evidence of G&M, and everything I see is evidence of whatever, But in this instance, it was very interesting because we'd had no conversation about it before. I kind of independently, and I'm thinking with Ever Better stuff, so I'm involved, and I know I'm familiar with the G&M, but I'm not, my head's not down in G&M like yours is, right? And so sometimes I'll notice things, and then we both noticed the hip thing kind of out of nowhere. No obvious injury, a lot of extra play, nothing out of the ordinary. And then you actually, I don't think knew right away. I think you had a vague idea, right? But then you looked it up. I mean, it was
because I had written it about humans just earlier that week.
Okay.
But I hadn't really connected it to because he's had hip stuff in the past, or he's had like little flare-ups of he'll be hurt, and we'll just assume. And this is the funny thing, because I used to assume this, and people, when I working in a chiropractic setting, people would just assume, they're like, I must have slept wrong. I must have, when there's a random injury or when there's a random pain that you can't directly associate with an injury, your kind of assumption is, oh, he jumped off the bed, he must have done something that we don't know about, something mysterious. Like if you've ever had a pain or ache, that's where you've got to start looking into if there wasn't an overt injury where you're like, yes, that was the moment that I did this thing and it absolutely hurt. If it just kind of came on almost out of nowhere, that you are kind of surprised that it's there, that's very likely due to one of the families of self-devaluation conflicts, which was the issue with the hip thing, which is the issue with the shoulder thing. And so there's a lot of different ways that can manifest in the body. But yeah, so
here, I mean, I guess what's the basic theme of this video is the idea that, okay, so you've got this new information, you're learning about GNM. How do you, and this is something that I, like, it's a challenge for me, this is one of the obstacles in working with individuals, working with people, how do you use this information resourcefully, rather than using this information in a way that causes you to be paranoid, or causes you to feel guilty, or causes you to, is it your fault if something that you do contributes to another organism, another person, another animal, whatever, experiencing a conflict shock? Because I mean, there's a certain type of personality, and it's a natural inclination, I think, where you start walking on eggshells around people, and some people are already doing that, and then they learn, oh my God, I'm going to give a person a heart attack or something like this, or contribute to some kind of and basically that's not true at all. It's not about really changing anything it's not your job to prevent a conflict shock in anyone else. That's the key thing. Even your own children. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's your job, obviously, to parent in the best way that you're possible. It's your job to be as sort of good of a person as you can be in a given moment in time. But it's never your job to be sort of better than you are or other than you are. And that's one of those things. And so the first thing that I had we would put down here in terms of how to relate to this issue, or the fact that it is true that things that you do can influence other people. I mean, that's true, but also, how do we tap into the fact that they're 100% responsible for their perception, for their experience, and for everything that comes from their perception and their experience, conflict shocks being one of those things. And it's how do you relate to this information? Are there patterns in the way that you relate to information? So a lot of people start off with a basic kind of existential position, or a basic presupposition that every bad thing that happens in their life is their fault, somehow or another. So if their husband gets sick, or if their child gets sick, or if someone gets offended at work, or if someone gets their feelings hurt, or whatever, they tend to process all of that information through a filter, through a perceptual filter that interprets it in terms of, okay, given this new information, how is this my fault, right? Because the assumption is that everything is my fault, more or less. How could this be my fault if it were? And a lot of people, I think, when they hear the GNM stuff, that's how they go through it. Oh, I feel so bad, I contributed to this. Oh, I feel so bad, that means I made this happen. And really, one of the big messages about GNM is that it's 100% the responsibility of the organism, because the organism is the only one that can do anything about it. The person with the conflict shock is the only one that can do anything about the fact that they're conflicted. The person with the conflict shock is the only person who can do anything about not, perceiving things in a way that leads to future conflicts down the line. And so I think that's the first thing, really, is to just get to recognize that perhaps, you may be one of the people who tends to, do you really feel guilty because of what GNM is telling you? Or are you one of these people who kind of feels guilty no matter what you hear, because you tend to filter it through the basic presupposition? Because our minds are incredibly powerful interpretive devices. And if you operate on the basic assumption that everything is your fault, you've got the ability to perceive every new thought system as kind of like the needle that broke the camel, or the straw that broke the camel's back, or like the final conclusive evidence that in fact, yes, even more than you thought was even more your fault than you thought that it was. So I think just recognizing kind of the baggage that we're bringing into this and other thought systems is the first useful thing.
And I think also to remember that by the time you know about something, one of the examples, we had a couple good examples, another person on Facebook and their dog too realized that, oh my goodness, I think that I could have caused this conflict shock that led to my dog having glaucoma. And really in that moment, I mean, the moment that it takes to kind of process, okay, now I know GNM, now I know, I've known that my animal has this issue, now I actually can see a connection between behaviors of mine and this manifestation of adaptation in them. Really more than anything, you can choose, and I definitely used to be a person that would filter things through guilt and blame and shame and it being my fault and feeling, like immediately feeling bad about it. But really, it's really a wonderful thing. It's now you have more information. Now you actually can feel that you can do something about it. Instead of the whole concept of feeling guilty or feeling blamed for this thing that's happening, it's now you have responsibility. Now, since you played a role, you weren't the only role, obviously the perception of the other being, whether it was your child, whether it was your dog, because that's the thing too, is not every animal is going to respond in the same way. Not every animal is going to develop a conflict shock. It has so much to do with just and that's why you can't really tailor your behavior to try to prevent other people, other beings from having conflict shocks, because you can have two children and you treat them in exactly the same way, but one of them interprets things one way, one interprets things the other way. And that's why it's really good to early on with your kids kind of get meta with them, talk about what's being talked about, instead of that experiencing life just through the lens of poor little me. Get up and start to see all of the different areas over which you have perceptual control. And so I think that is such a great thing, is you shift that feeling of blame, shame, or guilt into feeling, oh my goodness, there's something I can do about this. Now that I know that I am playing a role, I have played a role in this manifestation, I can change that. Isn't that a great thing? And so the faster you can shift from, oh my, because it was kind of a heartbreaking moment when we were just like, oh my gosh, this hip thing, and we told him to stop scratching, and we did that. We played a role in his discomfort. But it was kind of like, whoa, this is really awesome. Now we know that this is how he's responding. This is how he is perceiving us telling him to stop scratching. It's causing him this kind of overwhelm conflict. He wants to please us, but feels like he can't, and so he lost his self-worth and had a little bit of self-devaluation in that moment. And so it was like, wow, now that we know that, we can modify our behavior, but we don't have to feel bad that he is hurting. It's more just like, okay, that ecstasy of empowerment, that now we know, now we can change your behavior and moving forward. Because retroactive, like going back, that never works.
Well, the thing about it too is that the dog could have responded more. He didn't have to be as stressed as he was. It just happened that he was. The thing I was thinking about as you were going through there was two examples of like playing of a dog. So imagine that, and this is because I like to sneak up on people and startle people, and it's just I like to play jokes and pranks. And so let's say that one of the things that I do, which actually this is true, I do sneak up on my dog sometimes and startle him. Like if I can get the jump on him, because he's so sensitive. It's very gratifying to get to jump on a dog and startle him, because they hear you coming. One dog could have like rear fright conflict,
yeah.
Right? On the other hand, though, it's possible that another dog, or another version, another perception, could feel, let's say, neglected if I did not play with him in that way. And so you know what I'm saying? And so you don't know that like it really is all about the response, which is the second thing that we said. So the first thing was just, if you're feeling kind of guilty about this stuff, notice, is feeling guilty a pattern for you? Do you tend to process things in terms of how it's your fault, or what, this proves that I always knew I did something wrong, and this just shows me exactly what and how. So now I can really feel bad about it in a specific instead of a vague way. That's the first thing, is if you're bringing that to the table, I promise you that these are the people very often who are either sad or angry when they come into contact with new information. because they process it in a way that leads to a negative experience for them. And then they tend to blame the presenter or the messenger of the information because of the unconscious tendencies they have in terms of operating or using the information. The second one is getting more specific and technical with the GNM stuff. Recognize that the conflict shock is at the end of the day, it comes down to being the organism's responsibility, right? It's the individual, whether it's a dog or a person or a child or a parent or a coworker or whoever, it's their patterns of perception. It's their tendencies to experience things in a certain way. It's their, they have exactly as much awareness and exactly as much kind of, capacity to maintain equanimity as they do and no more. Ultimately, it doesn't mean that you go around trying to give people conflict shocks necessarily, but at the end of the day, the decisive factor always is what is the state of the individual for whom the conflict shock is happening or could happen or did happen, always. And it's never your job to prevent someone else from having a conflict shock, because you have a perception, you have an experience too. And, to the degree that you're feeling guilty, because someone else, you didn't manage their perception well enough, you're neglecting your own perception, and you're probably creating responses within your own body. The next kind of general topic is this idea that, and this kind of goes along, I think, with the second one about individual responsibilities. Like, no system is strengthened by avoidance. And so, if you kind of walk on eggshells around your child, if you kind of know what your child's perceptual tendencies are and how they tend to interpret a certain kind of remark or situation negatively, and you go out of your way to avoid that, and that's all that you do, well, you have to, of course, the rest of the world isn't going to know, and if it does know, it probably won't care that your child, this individual, has a tendency to interpret things in a way that causes them harm. You know what I'm saying? And I think recognizing that it's much better, like you said, to start to give the individual the capacity to have agency about their own responses. That's the only chance, really, that anybody has. And it's never about, avoiding or tiptoeing around the weakness, because it's like if there's like, a mess on the floor, let's say you got some, it's funny, it's like if you sweep a pile like of dust and dog hair and stuff like that, and you sweep and you make a pile in the middle of the floor, and you tell people to avoid stepping on it. That works for a minute if you're just going to go get the dustpan, but if you just leave it there, and you just avoid stepping on it, well, then it kind of gradually kind of spreads out, and so the place where you've got to avoid it's bigger and bigger and bigger. To the degree that we kind of tiptoe around our own or the sensitivities of the people, don't they tend to grow? Don't they tend to become more sensitive? Doesn't it tend to become easier and easier and easier to offend those people? Don't they then almost get offended by your efforts to avoid offending them? And to me, that's an example, really, actually, it's kind of an interesting example of the thing at the very top here, which is that if we filter information in terms of what it says about how we're guilty, because we're assuming that we are guilty, we're doing it ourselves. And so very often, if I'm worried about protecting you from being offended, I'm going to interpret things that you're doing in a way that causes me to feel offended. And so I think that it's one of those things where it's just recognizing that the solution here really is awareness. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to sort of change what you do moving forward, which kind of brings us to the next one, right? Which is this general topic of, did you want to say anything about that one?
No. Okay. He's pushing it to me.
That's really funny. He's getting very comfortable. He's hearing all this and he's saying, our dog, I don't
He's
know.
right back here.
There's this idea that, so when you learn new information, this is why it's really important to be resourceful in your relationship to learning things that maybe make past behaviors obsolete. You have to recognize that you're either never going to learn anything new that matters, or you're going to learn things that are new, and in the light of which past behavior is going to make less sense than they did to you at the time that you actually engaged in them, right? So you've got to either make sure you don't grow, make sure you don't develop, make sure you don't learn anything, or it's going to kind of behoove you to learn how to make peace with the fact that you know things now that you did not know then, and that the things that you did then are necessarily going to seem unresourceful, inappropriate, obsolete, somehow less than ideal in light of the information that you know now. That seems like a common sense and obvious thing, but so many people, especially when it comes to our kids or our spouses or our health or whatever, tend to overlook that reality. I mean, but ultimately, what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that is vegetation. It's stagnation. It's not growing. So if you don't look back on your past patterns and say, holy shit, what was I thinking then you're probably not growing as much as you could have. And so it's just really important to recognize that you're going to be constantly making your old self obsolete by the new things that you learn. And G&M is an example of that. To the degree that you engage with it, you really, you internalize it and you use it as one of the filters that helps you make a decision about how you're going to interact with information, how you're going to interact with other people, etc. And the other thing is to recognize, so there's two things you don't want to do. The first thing is you get this new information, and then you evaluate past behavior. Basically, not in terms of like, oh yeah, if I were going to do that again, I would do it this way because. And moving forward, I'll do it this way because it seems more effective, more resourceful. That's useful. Looking back though and saying, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, creating new guilt, from new information never makes any sense. I mean, you can create new behaviors from new information, but creating new guilt about old behaviors from new information is not a fair, it's not a useful way of relating to information. The other thing that you don't want to do is, so when you get a new system in place, and so you know about conflict shock, so as soon as I become aware of conflict shock, I say, I don't want to give the people I love conflict shock. Or let's rephrase that, I don't want to increase the chances that the people that I love will experience a conflict shock. And to the degree that I have that intention, and I have the intention, and I intend to carry it out, and I'm skillful, right, in basically translating that intention into practical changes in my behavior, which is to say practical changes in my focus and my feeling and my emotional state and my behavior around those other people, I will be successful in that. But I'm probably in the beginning not going to get it quite right. It's like archery. I mean, if I'm shooting for the bullseye and I've never done it before, I'm probably going to miss the thing altogether, then I'm going to get off on the outskirts, then I'm going to kind of zero in. And there's this lag time where behavior takes a while. Well, first of all, it takes a while for us to even become aware of stuff, to really, we get it conceptually, but we don't necessarily get it experientially, right? So I understand G&M, but I'll still get angry and say, not shout, but maybe raise my voice to you in a way that I wouldn't if I really was operating from an understanding of G&M here. And if I beat myself up about that, if I beat myself up about the rate of information integration that I have, I'm going to tend to slow down the process of that integration even more, right? So if I feel guilty about the fact that I don't process this and adopt it more quickly, I'm going to even slow it down even further. Mm-hmm. And so just recognizing that there's that behavioral lag time. So if you learn about conflicts and then you go and raise your voice at your kids or snap at your kids or something like that, and you go, oh, I can't believe it, and all this different stuff. Recognize that what we're trying to do here is just to introduce new awareness, new information into the ecology of you. Like this is, you're better off, even if you do the same old behavior patterns. It's not about resolutions, it's about intention, and it's about really giving you the ability, right, to start moving in those directions. It's about evolution. It's about, it's about this idea that we want to introduce new awareness into the ecology of your focus, feeling, behavioral system, and to allow positive changes to kind of develop at their own pace as a result of that. And to the degree that you let yourself do that, I mean, it happens so much faster, and it's a much smoother process. But there's this kind of persistent thing, isn't there? This notion or this sensation that I, in any given moment in time, should be other than I am. Mm. I should have known about this earlier. Now that I do know about it, I should be more effective at modifying my behavior in a way that reflects what I know now. And we just do all of this resisting the fact that we are as we are in a given moment in time. And that just inevitably, besides the fact that it makes you feel bad, it inevitably slows down the process of creating the kind of change that you want. It makes it take you longer to become an effective sort of G&M practitioner in everyday life, which is to say someone who, interacts with other people in ways that they're going to be able to perceive and experience as useful and resourceful.
Yeah, and I think too, just remembering you are the center. It's all the biggest experience that matters most is how you're experiencing things. And so as you become more sensitive to your own experience, and that's the thing, is a lot of people, we are so we don't care as much if we're having a terrible time. We're just, a lot of people are just outwardly projected. They want to make sure they're having an okay time and everybody else around them is doing well, but they're neglecting how they are feeling, and that needs to be reversed. You need to start caring foremost about how am I perceiving, how am I feeling, Because that's where all of the good that you can do for others flows from, is you first and foremost managing your own perception, optimizing in every moment. Am I seeing the best in myself, the world, and other people? Am I looking for things to be happy about, or am I looking for things to be upset about? And I mean, those are just primary stances. It's something we call sorters in our course that we teach. It's like, how are you choosing to filter information? And people, a lot of people, it's like they call it, oh, well, this is just my personality, this is just how I am, when really it's something that they do. Something they do very well, very unconsciously. It's something that was, adopted very early on, modeled by other people, was to be concerned with what other people thought, what other people are doing, how other people are feeling, and really like what's going on with you internally didn't really matter, because a lot of people no one even asked you about that. They asked, oh, well, did you do what the teacher said? Was a teacher mad at you today? You know what I mean? Rather than, how am I perceiving? How do I want to be perceiving? And so I think when you make that switch, when you really start making your experience the most important, more important than your kids, more important than your dogs, that it's, how am I experiencing? Because I know that if I sacrifice my own experience, I could be making adaptations in my body. I could be having a guilt conflict shock, a self-devaluation conflict shock over a conflict shock I gave to somebody else. And that's that whole, put your own oxygen mask on first. Like, you need to, mind your own mind and your own body's business before you can go about trying to improve anybody else's experience. And really the best way you can do that is by teaching them and instilling in them a responsibility for their own perception, their own experience. And so when everybody is minding their own experience, when I'm trying to have the best interpretation of you, just by overflow, I'm going to give you reasons to have good interpretations of me because I'm feeling good. But if I'm feeling bad and then I'm making him feel bad, we're both having conflict shocks. It's not going anywhere good.
And the thing about that too, though, is that to recognize, I mean, if you can't quite get to the point of believing that your experience matters more than your children or your spouse or whatever, you can say, at least get to the point of saying it matters as much. And then there's the issue of syntax, which is the issue of order, which is to say, what's more important, the cake or the icing? Well, it depends on whether you like the cake or the icing. I mean, we can have an argument about that, but we can't have an argument about which order it's supposed to happen in. You bake the cake first. If you put the icing on first, and then even if the icing is more important to you, if icing's your favorite thing, these kids are my favorite thing in the world, right? I'm the cake, they're the icing's the point of it. Who cares about the cake? Just give me the icing, right? Well, you can't really have the icing on the cake unless you bake the cake first. And that's kind of like your experience, right?
Good.
It's a syntax thing. It's an order thing. And another way that you can think about it is, truly, their experience, I don't believe this is ever really true, but let's say that their experience actually is more important to you than your experience. I think that, that your experience is enriched by them having a positive experience, and that's why their experience is so important, but we don't have to get into that. If the quality of person that you are, the quality of influence that you exert, let's say that can never really exceed the quality of experience and perception that you're able to create for yourself. Now, a lot of people do a pretty effective job at kind of doing things that look like exceptions to that, but they never really are. I think that they just hedge everything on being able to influence other people. But if you will kind of cultivate within yourself a capacity to perceive an experience resourcefully, it will trickle down to them without exception. And in the most important way that it will trickle down to them. Now, this is an interesting thing, because for a lot of people, they think being a good person or being a good parent means that the children, that the spouse, that the whoever says, you know what, you're a really good parent. You know what, you're a really good spouse. You're a really good whatever. Now, the interesting thing about that is that it's kind of a selfish metric in a way, isn't it? Because we're not necessarily concerned with the impact that our experience actually has on the quality of their experience. What we're concerned about is the degree to which what we did elicited from them a verbal approval or acknowledgement that we did well, that we were okay. I could have a child and I could be a very hard worker, I could deprive myself constantly, I could be a very kind of Spartan and austere guy who sacrifices experience for the well-being of my son or my daughter, and my son or my daughter would say, you're a great person, but their experience of me as a great person could be tremendously impoverishing to them, because it makes them feel like they've got to do the impossible task of matching me to even justify their existence. And so in that way, you see, it's possible for me to get the commendation that I wanted by sacrificing my experience. But what I've done is that I've shouldered them with the unspoken duty to basically outdo or at least match me. And so I have, basically in sacrificing my experience, what have I done? I've taught them how to sacrifice their experience. And so that's a very good parent who has, who's given rise to a child who may or may not have the best quality experience. Now, of course, ultimately, it's the child's responsibility, right, to figure out how they work and to recognize how they're relating to their image and their idea of their parent, and ultimately, it's the individual's responsibility. That's just an example, though, to the parents who are always constantly using their duty to the kids as an excuse not to really indulge in the actual good feelings of enriching their experience. I'm telling you, I promise you, that to the degree that you improve what it is like to be you, whatever that means for you, you will mirror, your children will mirror, you will model for them the intangible, kind of like ineffable, difficult to describe pattern, which is, listen, give your attention to improving the quality of what it's like to be you. One, that's a thing. There's a there. There's a something called what it's like to be you. One. Two, you're already ahead of people. Most people aren't even aware of the fact that there's something that it's like to be them. They just kind of take it for granted. And then number two, it's important. It's important enough to work on. It is relevant, right? And it's a couple of things. It's the most important thing for two reasons. One, everything else about what you do and what you create and what you contribute is going to be an outgrowth. It's going to be a reflection of the quality of what it's like to be you. That's the first thing. And number two, everything that you care about, including your friends and your family and all that stuff, you care about those things as a result of the influence that those things exerts on the quality of your experience of what it's like to be you. You love your children more than anything else in the world. Even that selfless love is filtered through this relevance. Why is it so relevant? Well, it's because my love for these children is such a salient aspect of what it's like to be who? You. You see what I'm saying? And when you recognize that, it's like there's this really freeing, synergistic kind of selfishness. And it's not the negative kind, but it's like, oh, okay, what it's like to be me. And the relevant thing that friends and family and kids really start to pick up on, if they want to, and really, kids are the only ones that matter anyway, because the friends and the family, they can, do whatever they want to do. They pick up on the fact that, man, mom and dad, or whoever, really, really made a point of improving what it was like to be them. You know what I'm saying? It was important to them, and they communicated to me that it was really important to me that I do what's right for me, that I find a way of being, right, that enriches the quality of my experience without encroaching on the rights of other people, without expecting other people to do things for me, without feeling like I've got to sacrifice everything about me in order to compensate for other people and then feel bad when that doesn't work. I just know that this is how it happens. I know this is how it operates, and that's a really wonderful thing to give to your kids. Now, you might not be you might have to come down off the cross to do that. And the question is that a sacrifice that you are willing to make? Are you willing to stop feeling bad for all the things you haven't done in order to start feeling good long enough to demonstrate to your kids, hey, even if you're 45 or 50 or 55 and you haven't done it right up until then, you can start prioritizing what it's like to be you whenever you want. I think that there's tremendous value there. And it's true virtue. It's like Taoist virtue versus like kind of Confucianistic virtue, which is like, a good parent is the good housekeeping mother of the year, versus the real good parent, who is the parent who raises kids that are capable of enjoying being alive. You know what I'm saying?
So good.
And there's a distinction there, and it's like for me, there's kind of like a humility in that, where it's like, listen, I'm not really concerned about winning the presidential award for parenting. If I have children, I want to raise children who are happy that they're here. I want to raise children who are autonomous. I want to raise children who say, what do I want to do today? And if what they want to do is drink a beer, or if what they want to do is start a charity, or if what they want to do is work out, or play video games, or do whatever they want to do, it's like an autonomous and a conscious decision, because they said, what's going to maximally improve the quality of what it's like to be me? And then they make a choice based on that. And that's just kind of a long spiel, I guess, about how to relate to other people. And all G&M says, really, right? All G&M says is that there are physical, histological, biological, health consequences to your ability to deliberately, consciously regulate what it's like to be you, your perception and your experience. That's all it's about, right?
That's it. And that's why we have found that with our approach that we were doing before we even really realized the true impact of perception, we knew that overall, stress negatively impacts health, makes you more likely to get sick, but it was in that other model where basically you thought that there becomes a breakdown in the immune system and your body's ability to fight things off when you are overwhelmed with too much stress. But the change in mindset that GNM brings is it's the perceptions, it's how am I seeing the world, how am I experiencing the world, and if my experience, if my interpretation of what's going on is there's danger, things aren't good, I'm in trouble, I've let someone down, I've done something bad, something like I need to adapt. Like that is just giving your body the signal to adapt. Your body is wise, it's doing the right thing, it's not making a mistake, it's making adaptations because it wants you to overcome whatever this conflict is, but until you become aware that you even have a conflict, that you are perceiving the world in a way that is less good than it could be, that's causing you to feel bad, and you know that by that kind of lingering negative emotion that you have, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's, if some kind of topic comes up and you freak out, that you've had past hurts that when you think about, you feel sad. It's all of that. What's going on up here? Like, what are you thinking about? You think 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts every single day. Where are those thoughts going? Are they, just kind of unsettled, unnerved, nervous, worried, guilty, fearful? And so we wanted to help people with that a long time before we ever knew about GNM. But now when you realize the kind of intimate importance of your perception and optimizing, of understanding what is my perception made out of? How am I seeing the world the way that I'm seeing? You know what I mean? And so you're not blaming, you're not like going to therapy and blaming your mom and your dad and all these people that did bad things to you when you were a kid, and that's why you'll just never be healthy or happy or have a good life. You start to say, whoa, hold on, I'm having a perception, and even when you're remembering, say, trauma from years ago, it's what's happening now that matters. It's for your perception in this now moment. It's how am I thinking about it? How am I relating to it? How am I creating this perception? And that's what we teach in our Ever Better Life course, is the components of perception. How is it that you have exactly the perception that you have and not a different one? Why are you thinking, feeling, and behaving in certain ways and not others? And most people, they try to change at the very bottom. They try to change behaviors. If only I would do this and eat healthy and exercise and wake up early, then I would be healthy. But it's what goes on before that, before the behavior as this manifestation. And so that's what we were teaching. And then we found the connection with German medicine. It just kind of like really brought everything home. So I hope this was helpful for you today. So like realizing that, walking on eggshells and being nervous about giving other people conflict shocks is not something you have to do. It's something that you may be prone to do, but hopefully with this video and with your ever-expanding awareness, you start to see that that is not a useful way to approach this new information, that there are better ways to take this knowledge, take these learnings, and translate it into something that's useful, that's going to make you feel good, help the people around you feel good, help everybody to be, healing and not being in an adaptive, worried, fearful state. And that's really what it's all about, is managing your own perceptions, your own experience, and doing your best to influence, other people in a positive way, or teaching them, especially if you have children. I mean, this is such a powerful thing, like gift to be able to give your child about their own perception, about how, the world's not going to walk on eggshells. So you, as an individual, you need to be aware of that and be able to extract positive meaning assignments from everything around you. And that's really what we teach you how to do, like the nuts and bolts of how to understand your perception in our course. So
there's a lot of like really specific things, tangible things that functionally, how do you do that, right? Because telling someone, listen, have a resourceful perception is like saying, just go do some calculus. If you just figure out how to do, if you just do calculus, everything will be fine. But if you break those down into individual operations, all of a sudden, it's like, in this moment I do this. Okay, today I'm going to think about doing things in this way. And the interesting thing about from the child perspective too is the degree to which you can experience whatever your child is up to right now is like not a big deal, because they're very sensitive to how you're experiencing them and how you're perceiving them, right? And so if you are, worried about them, then they have whatever anxiety they've got going on, and then they kind of add into that the unconscious kind of intuitive perception that you are worried about their condition, and then it sort of reifies, it reinforces the severity of their feeling, because you see they've got their child anxiety, which is based on whatever. It may be a ploy for attention. It may be that they're genuinely anxious about something. It may be that anxiety is just a racket feeling for them. It's just safe and familiar. It's their favorite bad feeling. Who knows which one, whatever. But if you then kind of come in and are worried or concerned about them, and if you are concerned about them in a way that's, not resourceful, if you're giving attention to what you don't want, they will know it. Just you can depend on that. They'll probably be more conscious of it than you are. You add that in. Do you see what I'm saying? And so the first thing is to find a way of relating to the reality of whatever is in a way that's resourceful. You'll actually communicate that to them. Now, some people will feign indifference because they're so worried. They'll say, well, you just got to toughen up. And that's like a harsh parent who actually loves their child, but they're really worried about it and they don't know what to do, and so it manifests as anger or frustration with the child. That's not what I mean here. What I mean here is it's not a bigger deal than it is. And to the degree that you can find a way of relating resourcefully, do you know what I'm saying? Listen, I understand that you're feeling bad, and I'm very sorry that you're feeling bad. However, it doesn't have to be a big deal that you're feeling bad. I care about how you're feeling, but it's not a big deal that sometimes you're feeling the ways that you don't want to feel. There are things that we can do about that. That's a very kind of refreshing thing, because you can comfort the child without bullshitting the child. You can also stimulate the child to grow in strength without being dismissive or cruel to them. You know what I mean? You can provide a really nice and healthy balance, and that almost always starts with anti-catastrophization, right? You don't want to catastrophize the fact that whatever is going on is going on. And so you say, basically, it's not that big of a deal. It's not a problem that this is happening right now. Mm-hmm. I know you don't want to stay this way. I know that this experience is one that you want. But fundamentally, the fact that you are screaming your head off in the back of the car, or that you're feeling insecure about stuff that happened at school, that doesn't have to be a problem. You're in a state you don't want to stay in. We can move you out of that state. And just recognizing that, I think, is a big thing.
That's actually huge, and that's what's called downgrading a conflict. So let's say someone is having a conflict and they're not able to get to a resolution for whatever reason. That ability to just not catastrophize something and make something, let's just downgrade it. Can we bring it from a 10? Can we bring it down to a 5?
Can we resist our resistance a little less?
Yeah, can we? Yeah, and that in and of itself is a really powerful thing, especially when it comes to the impact of the conflict shock itself, because the longer a conflict goes on and the more intense it is, the more tissue is being recruited in whatever body system is being affected. And so and so if you're realizing that you or someone is having a downgrading is a great first step. If you can't see a resolution, how can I feel better about that? Because freaking out about the fact you're freaking out is making it that much worse. And a lot of people do that. They see something and they know they don't want to be doing it, but they're resisting that resistance.
Which is based on that faulty premise that in any given moment you must be somehow other than you are.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I shouldn't be having a panic attack. I shouldn't be having an anxiety attack, and I'm even more upset about that.
Or you could even, if you really feel you shouldn't be, we can even grant you that, and then say, okay, you're doing something you shouldn't do. Is that really a huge problem? Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be an existential problem. It can be a behavioral problem. It can be a functional problem. It can be a situational problem. In the same way that there's underwear all over the floor. I need to pick up this and put it in the laundry basket, right, so I can go wash it. That's a situational, but it's not an existential problem for most people. I'm not going to get to that point of emotionally resisting this reality. And to the degree that you can, I think, extend that kind of graciousness and courtesy to your experience and to, more sensitive aspects of life, or the things that can be more sensitive, you allow yourself to really respond resourcefully. And that's people, a lot of the time for me, they say, oh my gosh, you're non-emotional, you're heartless, or you're just, I don't understand how, I would like to respond that way, but I don't think I ever could because I love so-and-so so much. I'm saying, listen, the amount that you love the person does not mean you've got to respond a certain amount of unresourcefully to their situation. I mean, it really is a functional thing, and it's look, your ability to extend your good sense, adult, rational thinker to areas of life that are of, ascending or escalating importance to you. Well, don't you want to be able to apply kind of rational, resourceful-based thinking to those things that are sort of most important to you? That just, a lot of people, they conflate, I love the person, 11 out of 10, and that means I've got to do things that are stupidly non-productive at least 1 out of 5 times. And it's like, free yourself from that, because to the degree that your view of yourself and of love and of relationships allows you to love a person to the max and respond as resourcefully as you possibly can, you'll tend to do that. But a lot of people have these weird injunctions. They've got these different things that says, if you don't once in a while if you don't love a person so much that the love impairs your treatment of them, well, then you don't really love them that much. Because part of loving people is behaving in ways that are destructive and then coming together and cleaning up the mess. And it's like, well, if that's the story, well, then you'll play out that story. But if your story allows for you to be both intelligent and passionate, well, then you can combine those two things. Most people, it never even occurred to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like most people, you settle down and you choose between the marriage or the relationship where you get along and things are good, or the one where there's a lot of passion. Where it's like, well, those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. It's in most of the classical literature, they don't happen side by side. But that's just kind of like an imagination thing.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting turns today.
Yeah, very interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Keep on asking questions in the group. It's been a really fun, interactive week. Learning more about GNM and how we can apply it to self-healing, and how are we perceiving the world, and how can we continue to improve in our understanding and improve our perceptions so that we can obviously continue to get healthier and healthier, because that's true prevention. And that's what I'm so excited about, is that prevention is how am I seeing the world? Can I be seeing it better? And so I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas and a really great week, and we will see you back next Saturday. Bye.